G'day, it's Jackie here. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. And I wanted to especially say thank you. The last newsletter that I sent out was quite a jam-packed one because I hadn't really been in contact for a little while because life had taken me elsewhere. And I'd spent a lot of time with family because my dad had died at the end of January. And I wanted to say thank you to the people that touched base with me and sent their condolences through. I could really feel that from the community. So thank you so much. It's so interesting because quite a few people emailed through their own experiences, saying that they'd had similar experiences with family members having transitioned from physical into non-physical space, and that they'd also had experiences of feeling the connection to them after they transitioned, and lots of other really, really beautiful things. I think this is going to happen more and more. I really feel like things are very much shifting and changing for us as human beings, where potentially as we move forward, when people pass over and die, your experience of that is going to be somewhat different to what maybe the experience would be, generally speaking, for people, 3, 4, 5 decades ago. It's so interesting because the founder of Body Talk also died in November 2022, I think it was. And the moment I found out about John passing, I sat with it for a second as I was reading the words in an email. And because your attention is then focused on that human being, it's like you're tuning into that human being. And the moment I did that and I focused on him, the only thing that I could feel and the best words that I could put into it to describe it was, it felt like he had, with his death, he literally, his consciousness had exploded into consciousness. And that was the first time I'd ever really had that experience of someone's consciousness being everywhere and everything at all times. And it was a very all-encompassing, positive, peaceful feeling. And that's the same experience that I had when my dad died. I remember sitting out in the backyard with my sister that day, I think it was, that dad died. And I remember just kind of sitting and feeling into the whole experience. And it felt like that he was everything and he was everywhere, all around us. And I remember him saying to my sister, it feels like he's just exploded into consciousness. And she'd kind of had a similar, if not same experience, and said, yeah, I agree with you. I think our experience moving forward of death and dying into each other is going to be actually quite different. And most definitely our understanding of what death is rapidly changing. I just can't tell you the amount of people that I've had experience with, either helping to facilitate sessions for them as they are in the transition process, and that's been for both people and animals as well, but also supporting people in their grief process, whether it be just after somebody that they love has just died, or whether that be weeks, months, or even years later. And what is so interesting is that the consciousness of these people shows up in their sessions. And they're just as vibrant and alive, but more aware. They come from a place of having more awareness, more perspective than what they were when they were alive. So their consciousness is very, very, very much still observing, very much still experiencing, but experiencing in a very different way than what they were when their consciousness was anchored into a a flesh bag, a fun bag, I was going to say, the physical body. Yeah. So that is a super interesting experience. And I got asked, what if you've been brought up to view death as being something that's very final? And the idea is that when somebody dies, that's it. They're gone. They cease to exist at all. Well, in my experience, that's not true. I've had so much amazing, wonderful experiences with sentient beings after they've transitioned over. So when they're no longer anchored or attached to a physical body, I've had far too many experiences with them in all different ways to know that that's just not true anymore. Plus, there is literally hundreds and thousands, if not millions, of documented accounts of people that have been through near-death experiences, traveled into the non-physical realities, and there are multiple realities, far too many for your mind to even comprehend. And for many different reasons have come back and have told of those experiences. Millions of people. There's probably even more than millions of people, because we're talking about over the collective of time. And they come back with very similar accounts and experiences of what non-physical reality looks like. And it just reiterates over and over again. We don't actually die. We shift from one state of consciousness into another. So from physical reality into non-physical reality, but our consciousness is still very much that, our consciousness awareness. And it looks like that journey just continues, and that consciousness continues to learn and grow and evolve and have different experiences. And what I do see, and I have had this experience with a couple of people that I've worked with over the years, where, and it's really quite a breath of fresh air. Let me back up for 1 second. So in answer to that question, consciousness is all that there is. We're all consciousness. So there's not going to be a time where a consciousness just collapses into itself and fails to be anymore. Like it doesn't exist. That consciousness always continues to go on. So it's never not going to be the case that somebody dies and then that's it. Yeah. The physical body has done its job. It's served its purpose. Now that can go into resting mode, nourishment mode, however that body is used. And the consciousness that is that person or that animal very much continues to go on and have its experience, right? What I also seem to be realizing is that in one way, grief is actually love. It's love in its biggest, rawest, most authentic expression. And I think sometimes the reason why we struggle with that, if you remember ever being in that space of grief where it can't, like almost, some people feel like the body can't contain it, or they feel like their body's going to explode, or their mind will explode, or they'll often say, I just can't cope with it. I can't cope with it. I can't cope with it. That's love. That is the expression of love that we're struggling with. That is how huge and how mighty and how all engulfing love and the consciousness of love actually is. So when we're in those spaces of grief and those feelings and emotions come through, one of the biggest things that you're experiencing is love. And if you can remember that, and instead of trying to pull yourself out of it and get away from it because it feels like it's too much or it's too big, if you can choose to instead of moving away from it, lean in and allow it to come and find you. And remember, this is love that I'm feeling. This is love. This is how much love I felt for that person, right? And then as far as connection, because a lot of people say, but I can't see them, I can't hear them, I can't connect to them. And one of the reasons why you won't be able to have some type of connection to them is maybe if you're resisting the process. So you're trying to move out of the space of that pain, or really, it's love that is so big that we're not used to it. So we will interpret that sometimes as pain, right? We'll interpret love that is so big as pain, and we'll try to get away from that. Sometimes when in that process, that can really affect your ability to be able to feel that person that's moved into non-physical space, be able to communicate with them in that space, because it is possible to be able to have some type of connection or communication. And I also just want to remind you, if I forget to tell you later, is that you can have contact with them. They can hear you. So the things that you say out loud, the things that you think, your wishes, your intentions, they receive that. They receive that because now they've passed into a space of consciousness where communication is non-verbal. So it's much easier for them to receive that communication than it is for you to receive that communication. But it's not to say that we can't get there. We can get there. I have worked with several people over the years that have really shown me the potential of what this whole process can look for us in the future. And it reminds me of a baby that gets birthed. Very often people will get excited at a new baby being born, and, I can't wait for them to be here. Oh my gosh, it's going to be so great when they're here. And we get excited about a birthing process for a baby. And really what that process is for the baby, what my process was for me as a baby, right, was we had this experience of realities we knew it that was in utero. And then we went through a transition process where we were in utero, and then we became out of utero. And now we're in this different time space reality with people, and we're having all different experiences. But really, it's just transition. It's transition that we know all and do. We all know and we do so much of. We go through so many transition phases throughout our life. And for many reasons, we've then got really stuck and fearful on this transition from physical into non-physical space. So we will celebrate the birth of a baby, but we will not celebrate somebody's transition or somebody's death, right? But I have seen that happen. I have seen people celebrate somebody going from physical into non-physical state. And it was a really beautiful thing to see, because that person was able to be honored in that time for the experience that they were having. And that person who was then celebrating that transition for them was able to experience the love that they'd always celebrated for that person. They just didn't see it as being any different. They were celebrating transition. They were celebrating another different state of transition, just recognizing that that person had been through all other different kinds of states of transition. So every time we go through major shifts in our life, that's a transition process. And quite often those major transition processes come with conflict, or that can be really hard, really, really tough. But that's also a time to celebrate, because there is always really great change that occurs with that. And most of the time, especially if you're taking the learning from the experiences, there'll be great growth that comes from that as well. So maybe we can start to shift more into an awareness of celebrating transition, because it's represents growth in our consciousness, because that's really all that it is. It's consciousness shifting and expressing itself in a completely different way. And I did notice that that's definitely how I feel. Like, it's not to say that there's not sadness. It's not to say that there's not grief there when it comes to, me navigating this process with my dad. But I find it easier because of the work that I've done and because of the experiences that I've had with other people and with animals. And I have to say also, when my nan died quite a few years ago, the sense of freedom that I got from her after she'd disassociated from her physical body, I got it from her, a really great sense of freedom, like loving, joyful freedom, that I actually was so grateful to her. And I was so, what's the word I'm looking for? So glad. I was so glad that she was now free of this physical body that really was in a state of pain and contraction and was giving her a lot of grief. And when she died, I thought, I not only did I think, but I could feel it from her. Wow, I'm so glad she's in this space of freedom now. But that can be really hard for people to understand and to digest, because if the mind still sees it as something that's very final, then it quite often can get repulsed by something like that. So then that would be my other suggestion that came from the other questions that came through, is it's really important that you approach things with an open mind. And even when we don't know all the answers, sometimes we don't even know the questions that we have to get the answers that we need, is to just stay in this space of open-mindedness and curiosity. And very often the answers will reveal themselves to you, and you'll have experiences because of that open-mindedness that really show you what's out there and give you experiences of other aspects of reality that you didn't even know existed. So that would be my really big tip, is stay open-minded. Don't discount anything. Don't put anything in the rubbish bin and say, that's not possible, that will never be. The analytical mind, and especially the ego that loves to protect you, it loves to do that, loves to discount things, loves to lock things away and say, no, that's not possible. So stay with an open, curious mind and go, what if? What if? Yeah. And in that space, from that space of curiosity, it is far easier for these people and these animals that have transitioned in non-physical space to be able to connect with you. So I had an experience, I think it was a day or two after Dad died, where it was in the middle of the night, because I'd been having a little bit of trouble sleeping in the days after he died. And I was asleep, and I'd woken up in the middle of the night, 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and I'd been awake for quite a while. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, I'm going to be like a zombie tomorrow, like today, if I cannot get back to sleep and get some extra hours sleep, because I do not function well on no sleep. And I rolled over with the intention of putting myself back to sleep. I rolled over and I took a few big deep breaths. And when I rolled over onto my left-hand side, my feet were positioned kind of like this on top of one another. And what I felt on the top foot that was like this, I felt a warm hand come and just lay itself over the top of my foot like this and kind of do a bit of firm pressure. And it reminded me, because I used to do that to the kids sometimes. I didn't want to startle the kids awake, and if they were asleep and they needed to wake up, sometimes I'd go in and just put a gentle hand on their foot or something like that. And it wasn't even that I was asleep or half asleep or dreaming. I had been wide awake for ages and was trying to put myself back to sleep. And here I felt this huge warm hand, which uh, I I think even though I couldn't see him, it actually felt like my dad's hand. But I sat up bolt right because it scared me so much. And the house was absolutely dark. And I sat up and I just said out loud, I said, no touching in the dark. Because I'm like, I don't mind contact, but just don't do it at the dark when it's dark and I can't see and it's too scary. So that was a really interesting experience that I have. And I'm certain that I had that experience because I was just open to it. My sister likewise had an experience where she was doing some yoga or meditation, I think. And one of the things that she was doing when dad transitioned was she was rubbing her hand down his arm, and in when she was doing her thing, she could actually feel dad rubbing down her arm for quite a while. And so there was, over the course of the days after he transitioned, there was probably for me about 4 different contact experiences, physical contact experiences. I know my sister had the same. But that would be my suggestion, is don't try to force it, just allow it to be whatever it's going to be. We're suffering a lot of amnesia as human beings. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I think that before we come into this human experience, we actually know a lot. We're connected to all of universal consciousness, and all information is held in universal consciousness. And I mean all information of all information. And what comes up again and again is that as we come into this human experience, we suffer a lot of amnesia. We forget our potential. We forget our, our natural human qualities. We forget that love is the most important thing on the whole planet. How do you heal? Love. How do you repair things? Love. What's our way forward? Love. Love is the answer, right? And everything that comes from love, which is community and connection and empathy and honesty and all those kinds of things, that all comes from a space of love. So we've also then got to remember that if we're experiencing a lot of amnesia, then we say there's a lot that we don't know, but it's a lot that we've just forgotten. So in the way that I see it is that we're waking up and we're remembering. We're remembering a lot of things. And sometimes we get the jogs of memory of, oh, yes, we've got access to that. Oh, yes, we can actually do that. That's a natural thing that we can do. It's a skill, it's a resource, it's something that we can tune into. We're in a process of remembering that we can actually do that. And hopefully today's video has given you just a little bit of a reminder on things are never, ever, ever, ever final. Is that they just continue to go on expressing themselves, but in a different way, and that you have access to that always, all the time. And that if you stay with an open, curious mind and an open, curious heart, that you will find ways to be able to connect with it and receive information from not just the non-physical field, but receive information from then the world around you that will help you grow and evolve as a human being as well. And I think we'll get to the stage, maybe not my lifetime, but I think humans will get to a stage where they really embrace and understand that it's this transitional thing that we do is something to be celebrated, that we can still connect with each other no matter what state of consciousness that we're in, and that there's so much good. I feel like there's so much untapped wisdom in that we are not able to uncover just simply because we're still in this space of suffering around all of that. Yeah, we stay in this space of suffering. And Yeah, and that's really exciting to know that we're moving into that space. Um, Keep the questions coming in. If you've got any questions about death, dying, mortality, if you have any fears, any beliefs about that, let me know. Put it into the comments, send it into the office, and there's some more exploring there that I want to do as well. If you would like any information on how to do up a death plan, then I have some really good resources to pass on to you. And if you would like to see an interview that I did with Lynette Favell, who is an end-of-life doula, then let me know, and I will absolutely share that into the public space. It was an interview that I did with Lynette for the My Incredible Orbit members, but it feels really fitting that we could perhaps offer that now if you're interested. And Lynette had some really good resources to websites where you can download your own plans and documentation, and you get a say on how you fill that out and what you want things to look like for you. And it also lets then people know, if you ever get into a space of not being able to express your wants or your needs, it's all documented, and people can make sure that that happens around you as you're transitioning and after the transition process. So yeah, let me know what questions you have about any of that at all, and I'm happy to help you in any way that I can. All right. Thanks so much for hanging out with me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.